Well, good morning, good afternoon, depending upon where you are. I'm sure in some places it's still morning. The clock on the wall in the living room is bonging 12, so it's officially afternoon here. Hope your Sunday is going well. Hope you've had a chance to get outside and make a few chips this morning. Let's see. Today's live Q&A is going to be on my video this morning on my Gatton CNC review. Before we get into that, um, just wanted to say a couple things. In watching the video after it was done, I know I sound like an advertisement for Gatton CNC. It really was not intentional, but I kind of think that was really unavoidable. I don't work for Dave Gatton. Um, I I make nothing from this. It's just something that I use, I like, and I appreciate. And I had told Dave I wanted to review the Gatton CNC after I got it built, and he said, "Well, why don't you use it a little bit before you make any decisions?" And I thought, well, that's a good idea. And then I promptly forgot it. So 2 years later, it's like, you never did do a review of that kit. So I think I've used it enough to kind of know my machine anyway. So before we get going, let's take a little bit of a look over here on the side and see who's with us on the mighty YouTubes. We got Bob Lee's Wood Shop and Other Things. We have Restorer 66, Jeff. How you doing? Kevin Ells, David Crook. Shout out to David Crook. Thank you very much for the generous donation quite a while back. I do appreciate it. I was waiting to see you in the chat before I mentioned it. Very much appreciated. Let's see, Les Douglas, Troy Pritchard, Ian Foote, Stephen Rice, Bob Heltebridle, poster of some hilarious ding dong memes over on Facebook. I swear I crack up more on some of the stuff you post than I probably should. And Steve Gronsky, how y'all doing today? Hope it's going well. Um, there is already, and David Kraus, how you doing this morning? There is already a question over here on in the comments here on YouTube from Restorer 66, Jeff. How would I compare lead screw system to a belt driven CNC? Just my opinion. I don't think there's any comparison. Now, it also depends on what you're doing. There are applications that a belt drive is appropriate. If you're running a laser, for example, if you're running a diamond drag bit or a drag knife or something like that, then they're perfectly appropriate because you're not putting a lot of pressure and you're not driving a lot of weight. But when you get into a situation where you have a router or spindle, not only do you have the weight of that router or spindle, but you also have torque from the motor spinning. Then you also have the pressure of that Z axis pushing down into the wood so that the bit can do its cutting. Now you're going to add more forces in moving the gantry back and forth, moving your X, etc., etc. So there's a lot of forces at play in there. Belt drive will work. I mean, that's proven. Look at every Shapeoko and X carve out there, plus several others. They do work. But they have one inherent problem, and that is that eventually they will stretch. Belt drive can be a lot faster than lead screw because it's a more direct drive system. Um, so for every turn of the motor, depending upon the ratio you set, the timing pulley on the motor will turn one revolution, so will it'll move the axis a certain uh, amount. They tend to be faster, but you also have shallower depths of cut, and we're talking about consumer level, home hobbyist level. We're not talking about a production shop. Um, as far as a production, or if you're going to be cutting heavy materials or you want some good depths of cut, I would tend to go with lead screw, because a lead screw will not stretch. It shouldn't deform. If you deform a lead screw cutting wood, the lead screw is not the issue. That's not the problem. There's something else going on there. So for a home hobby machine, they both have benefits. They both have disadvantages. I would say look at what your budget will allow, and take an honest look at what you're going to do with your CNC. And that's something I didn't bring up in the Gatton review. For what I wanted to do, what I wanted to make, lead screw was the way to go for me. I did look into the X-Carve and I did look into the Shapeoko, but it was only a passing glance because I knew that they were too light duty for what I wanted to do. So I would let your budget and a good, honest assessment of what you plan on doing with your CNC be your guide as far as belt drive versus lead screw. I see Todd HCNC over in the chat. He's absolutely right. A belt is faster, but not as precise as a screw. I've heard that, but I haven't seen anything definitive on it. And not having a belt drive here, I can't confirm or deny that. I mean, I'm willing to accept it if you have experience with it. But a belt could certainly stretch and skip a tooth, jump time. I don't know how difficult they are to keep square in the case of, if you have a dual axis. What I mean by that is two motors running an axis. I don't know, anything about squaring them up or what have you. But I do know that I have lead screws on all of my axes, with the exception of the rotary. It's belt drive. And for the belt drive, it works just fine. And again, we're talking about a router. If you're running something like a drag knife or diamond drag bit or a laser where you're not trying to move huge amounts of weight and you don't have a bunch of torque or other forces, then belt drive is just perfect. I mean, belt drive, just about every laser out there, I think, is belt drive. I don't know of any lead screw driven lasers out there. And I'm talking about the home hobby market. I'm not talking about production machines. So let's see. Samuel Martzel, can I make a vector file out of a 3D file? Grayscale. I'm not really sure what you mean by that. If you're talking about just an outer profile to cut it out, yeah, that's very simple. And I show that in a few of my 3D carving videos if you're using Vectric software. So, Jeff wants to know what router and horsepower do you use? I use a Porter Cable 890 series router, which is 2.25 horsepower. I've had that since 2007. And when I got the CNCs built, that's what I put on there. Mainly because it was variable speed and I knew it had more than enough horsepower to do what I wanted to do. I don't really use the variable speed. I do in some regards. I keep it set to about 16,000 RPM and I adjust feed rates from there. And the only reason I have not gone to a spindle is because I don't have 220 volts in my shop shed. Now, I hope to break ground on a new shop this spring, and I will be putting 220. And then I still haven't decided whether I'm going to go with an air-cooled or a water-cooled spindle. I have a feeling I'm going to be going with an air-cooled simply because I don't plan on heating the shop 24/7. So I do have freezing to concern myself with because it gets downright cold here in the Pacific Northwest. So I will probably go air cooled, but we'll see what happens. But I do plan on mounting a 2.2 kilowatt spindle on it and then going from there. So mainly because I miss my Porter Cable 890. It's a fabulous hand router and an excellent router for a router table. So let's see. Jim Hester. Hey, Mark. I love the video this morning. Thank you very much, Jim. Looked at a Gatton when I was shopping, but didn't know what to look for. I spent 2.5 times what a Gatton would cost. That's very common and it's very easy to do. It's very, very easy to do. I mean, I drool over some of the Joe CNCs and some of the rack and pinion systems and some of the things that they're doing, some of the speeds that they're getting out of the rack and pinion. And then I take a look at the prices and I'm like, yeah, no, that's too rich for my blood right now. I'm a home hobbyist. I don't make things to sell. Now, I sell some things I make, but I'm not in this for I'm not in this to get into production and make a bunch of parts. For instance, I did a video a few weeks back where I carved some mason jar lids for my wife for her teas. And I was talking with somebody, I don't even remember who, and they were saying, well, are you going to make those and sell them? And the simple answer is no, because I don't want to make mason jar lids for the rest of my life. I make gifts for friends and family. I do make some things to sell, but that's not my primary mission. My primary mission is to have fun and make things that we need around here. So that's where I am there. Now I have a machine of limited size. Jim continues in poor rigidity. I may build the Gatton, then sell mine, probably not lose money. Well, I hope that works out for you, Jim. You know, the Gatton is not the end all and be all. It's a fabulous machine. Don't get me wrong. I really like it. And in fact, I was serious. There may be a second one in my future when I get the shop built. Mainly because, well, I'm not going to give that away yet. So there may be a second one in my future when I get the new shop built. I still have the old shoestring budget CNC in storage. So that may make a comeback for smaller items. So God only knows. I mean, it's easy to spend a lot of money and it's easy to get less than what you think you're getting. But then again, hindsight is always 20/20. You know, a lot of times we just don't know that going in, and the only way to find out is to get experience. So, what can you say? What are the telltale signs of bits becoming blunt? Well, number one, is it burning the wood? Number two, is it ripping or shredding the wood rather than cutting the wood? It also depends on what kind of a bit it is. Number one, keep them clean. What I do as soon as I'm finished using a bit, I take it out of the collet. Don't let it set in there. Because as you cut, no matter how cool that bit is, you're still releasing, resins and just gunk from the wood. And that can get up in there, and as it cools down, it becomes like concrete. The longer you let it sit, the worse it gets. So I always pull my bits out of the collet as soon as I'm done with them. And then after 2 or 3 uses, you can see it. You can take a look at a bit and you can see it. I put them in a little mason jar with a little bit of VM&P naphtha or acetone. Seal it up and let it soak overnight. Then take it out the next day, wipe them off, blow them off with compressed air. And that'll improve a lot. But if you're having to slow down your feed rate slower than your normal and the bit just isn't cutting as cleanly, you probably need to either have the bit resharpened or replace it. One or the other. So, let's see here. Todd HCNC, build a Gatton with rack and pinion. You know, the thought has crossed my mind. And there is a gentleman, I can't remember his name right now, who built a Gatton and he converted the X-axis to rack and pinion. Then he's working on doing the Y-axis to rack and pinion. We'll see what happens. Samuel Martzel, I want to make a multi-wood carving. All I see people use a solid piece of wood. Vector would allow me to make like a puzzle start point. If you're talking about carving part of a carving out of, say, maple and another part of a carving out of cherry, yes, you can do that. There are several ways of going about it, and the way I'm getting ready to mention is not the end-all and be-all. Look into model slicing. I haven't done a tutorial on that yet. It's on the list, but model slicing is used for several things. Mainly, for instance, if you wanted to make a piece 2.5 inches tall, obviously you don't have a 3D carving bit that long. You can slice that model into 3/4 inch sections, cut all those pieces out, and then glue them together after it's done. 3D model slicing is used for things like that. I don't know if it's available in VCarve. I know it's available on Aspire. I'll do a little bit of digging before I do that tutorial, but that's going to be down the road a little bit. I have to get started on Christmas stuff, so a lot of my tutorial videos are going to be on techniques that I'm using for Christmas stuff. So, spoiler alert. Although next week is not going to be a tutorial video, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. Okay, for example, he says the Marine Corps SEAL, break it down into parts. You certainly could do that. You certainly could. Your modeling skills would have to be pretty good. You would need separate 3D models to do that. I thought maybe you meant elevation. But there would be ways of doing that. And I think that would be fantastic. So if you do something like that, by Godfrey, post pictures of it. Now you got me thinking. David Crook says, if you cut a smaller size than max regularly, a rack and pinion may wear in one spot. Not good. Okay, I have no experience with rack and pinion, but that's some excellent advice that dovetails into something else, David. And that is, I know we all want to go big and bad on our sizing, and I did too. The main reason I made my CNC as wide as I made it was because I needed to, my old shoestring budget, the longest piece I could put in was 33 inches, and I needed to go wider than that. I just couldn't get it, what I needed to get done on 33 inches. So I made it to where it would cut 50 inches wide, knowing I would be able to fasten down a half sheet of plywood or something the width of a half sheet of plywood and start cutting. Because I was doing just enough projects that I needed that width. Now that those projects are gone, I tend to use smaller areas. I would say the majority of my projects are less than a foot square. And knowing what you're talking about, David, and being concerned with wear here and there, even just something as simple as cutting into my spoil board, I tend to try to move around where I place my material on the table so that I'm not focusing just in one area. But as you saw with the little Sharpie marks on top of my aluminum rails in the video, I don't have a wear problem as far as linear rails are concerned. It's more about just moving things around so that I'm not tearing up one section of spoil board and not being able to mount something there, you know. Okay, Steve Gronsky's got to run. Have a good one, Steve. Take care. Get out and make some chips if you can. Joni Jensen, what a great idea, cleaning the bits. Yeah, cleaning the bits and the collet and the taper up inside the router or spindle is something that should be done regularly. I don't have any set schedule It just really depends on what I'm doing and how much I've used the machine. But I'll pull the bits out, and if I'm not going to use the CNC for a few days, I'll drop the collet down into that little bottle of acetone or VM&P naphtha and let it soak overnight. Then the next morning, for the collet, I take an old toothbrush and scrub it out real good. I have some little nylon. Without getting controversial here, I have little nylon bore brushes for a 22 caliber rifle, and that's what I use to clean out the inside of the collet. And it's just a plastic brush, gets in there and cleans it out, and blow it out with compressed air, and they're just good. So let's see. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce what your username is there, ACG. I've just started getting into CNC, coming from 3D printing. Your videos literally have taught me everything I know and aspire. It's taught me everything I know and aspire to. Thank you. Okay, you go by the name of Phil. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. If you want to get pitch that build up on router bits and saw blades. Okay, he uses PB Blaster. I've not used PB Blaster for that. I know back at the cabinet shops and in the furniture shops, we used Easy Off Oven Cleaner on our blades. Blades and router bits, put them in a plastic bag, spray them down, go home, come in the next morning, rinse them off in the deep sink, blow them off with compressed air, and off you went. It's just I always seem to have some acetone or naphtha laying around that I can clean them up with, so that's what I use. For the taper up inside the router where the collet goes up into, just some Q-tips with some acetone. I blow them out with compressed air and then some Q-tips with that acetone and get in there and clean it all out. And it works. It works real well. You would be amazed at the difference it makes. I'll put a link in the description of this video when it goes live. Peter Pasuelo over on his channel, CNC Nuts, a couple years back, posted a video on how to touch up a V-bit with a diamond stone if they start to get a little bit dull. And this is for a 2-flute V-bit with carbide tips. So I'll put a link to that. It really works well, and it can save you some money replacing V-bits. It's good stuff. So I'll put a link in the description of this video when we go off the air and I find it. So give me about 10 minutes. In fact, if you're not subscribed to Peter, you really should be. He was the first CNC YouTube channel that I subscribed to back when I was first getting started. He's got a lot of excellent information over there about checking the actual angle of your V-bits. I mean, yeah, you go down and you buy a 90-degree V-bit, but that 90 degrees is nominal. Is it 89? Is it 91? He's got a video that'll show you how to make sure of that. He's got all kinds of good videos over there. Good information, and just simply put, he's a real good guy. So I'll put a link to the video about touching up V-bits and just a link to his channel. Head over there and subscribe. He's got a lot of good information over there. So does anybody have any questions or any comments on the Gatton CNC build, my particular CNC, or anything that I discussed in the video this morning? I mean, I know it sounds like I'm advertising for Dave, and maybe in some ways I am, but I just really like my machine, and wanted to let folks know that after 2 years of use, this is what I found. This has been my experience with it. As far as anything I would have done differently, I would have started on it sooner. If I had the room, I would have made it a little bit wider, say maybe 2 or 3 inches wider, just so I had a little bit more room to clamp out on the edges. You got to be careful on my machine how you arrange clamps. That's why I tend to use screws a lot. And I would have, if I had the room, I would have made it a lot longer. I would like to be able to cut a half sheet of plywood, because I'm getting into situations now where that would be to my benefit. So I've got like 3 projects I'm going to have to put on hold. So let's see. Jeff says, when you use the painter's tape and CA glue, how do you compensate for that on a through cut? I don't. I don't baby my spoil board, Jeff. I measure to the surface of my material, and because it's very, very rare to get perfectly flat material, I set my tool paths to cut about 5/1000 into the spoil board. Cut beyond 5/1000 before the or 5/1000 deeper than the material is thick. I don't baby my spoil board. I just surface it and drive on. That's what it's there for. It's there to be spoiled, so your table isn't. So I don't do anything to compensate. Les Douglas wants to know, what size stepper motors did you use on the Gatton CNC? When I built my Gatton, okay, let's back up and regroup. I started building the old shoestring budget CNC in 2014. I got it finished in March, maybe May of 2015. And at that time, Xylotex was producing an all-in-one plug-and-play drive box. He has since discontinued the drive box that I have, so that's no longer available. The stepper motors were 4 amp, 425 inch-ounce motors. So pretty torquey motors. I've yet to have a problem with them at all. They do run hot, but all steppers run hot. I mean, so I've yet to have an issue with my Xylotex drive box or those motors. But he is having a problem getting those motors now, which is one of the reasons why he has stopped building that kit. I don't know if the manufacturer no longer makes them, or if they've gone on to other things, or what's going on. But they're 425 inch-ounce motors. So, see, Darren O'Neill, while we're on V-bits, I've just started getting into using a 60-degree V-bit. The bits that I buy seem to have the ends chipped, not a perfect point at the end. Any you can recommend? A lot of V-bits come purposely with a flat tip. They don't have a pointed tip. For V-bits, I'll put a link in the description as soon as I find it. For the 60 degree, there's 2 of them that I'm using. I use a Magnate. I'll probably get the part number wrong, so I won't quote the part number until I find the link. A Magnate 60 degree V-bit, and I really like the CMT laser point 60 degree. And now, again, it's just like anything else. If you drop it, you're probably going to blunt the tip. But there are a lot of V-bits out there that do have a flat tip on it. So just kind of know that going in and take a look before you buy. So let's see. Landis Stutes, really enjoyed this morning's video. Could you comment more about not using the cutout for the rotary axis? Okay, yeah, that was a mistake on my part. Again, not knowing any better, because I didn't know which rotary axis I was going to go with. I didn't know if I was going to build one. I didn't know if I was going to buy one. Excuse me. So I had no sizes to compare to. If I had known how big the head unit and the tailstock is on the rotary axis kit that I bought, I would have made that opening wider in order to get something a little bit longer in there. As it sits right now, by the time I get the head unit mounted and I get the tailstock mounted in there at its max limits, I can only put a piece about 15 3/4 inches long between centers. That's all it'll fit in the chuck, and I can just kind of get my tailstock snugged up there. And that's just enough to upset me. You know, I've got a few little things that I can do, but when you're talking about, for instance, I do a lot of work on spinning wheels. And I wanted to be able to remake legs and things of that nature. Well, legs are like 22 to 26 inches long, and I just can't do it. So what I should have done was built the machine first, got the rotary axis, then figure out where I could mount it to where I could still get that bit over the front edge of the table on and center it on the rotary axis, then make the cutout from there. So I don't know, that sounds like, you know, going from Oregon to California via the North Pole, but that's kind of sort of what I'm talking about, what I should have done. I don't think it was a waste of time, but I would have thought it through a little bit more. But again, I didn't buy that rotary axis kit until about a year after I got the CNC up and running. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. 60-degree V-bits are tricky to keep the tip from breaking. Yeah, especially if you drop them, Todd. Ask me how I know that. You know, that's nice big chunky CMT laser point 60-degree bit. Drop it and it's like, okay, fine. And because of course it has to hit tip first. It's the law. So how do you break the tips of a V-bit when cutting wood? Run into a screw. Don't ask me how I know about that. Drop it, like I said. I think the most tragic one I've ever dropped was a 23 thousandths end mill for cutting fret slots in a fretboard. Opened it up and just ploop, fell right there on the concrete and snapped it. It was never even chucked into the router. Just boom, you know. So I see Bob Helter Bridle has found the part number for the magnet 60-degree V-bit. Thank you, Bob. I'll make sure it's the one that I have. And then put a link to it down in the description. Landis says that's where he's at and want to add a rotary axis. Yeah, personally, I would look at the various rotary axis kits, see which way you're going to go, and get some measurements and just make sure to allow room for it. I surely didn't, and that was a big mistake. But I have another fix for that when I get the shop built. So, see, Jeff wants to know, how long did it take me to build my Gatton? Let's see, everything all in, I think I have probably, I was taking it slow. I wasn't trying to rush anything. I think I have probably 40 to 45 hours into building it. So, you know, but then again, it just depends on how fast you work. I wasn't trying to rush it. And also I'm videoing the whole thing. So that's why there's 11 episodes of me building it, and then I think another 4 or 5 episodes of accessorizing. But I was somewhere right around 40, 45 hours, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I didn't really, you know, because I spaced it out over the course of several months, and I had it already halfway finished before I started posting videos. So let's see. Why can't I go through the y-axis to get more length between centers, says Jim Chisnall. That is simply because of the way my shop is laid out. My CNC is 54 inches across. Inside my shop, I have a little bit less than 8 feet. So that gives me about 17 inches on each side of the table to get around to the sides. If I tried to mount my rotary axis with the Y, I would have to be able to get around to the back to adjust the tailstock. And it is a major pain in the you-know-what to get back there. If I had a bigger shop and more space, that's the way I would have gone. I would have gone with my Y-axis because that's usually the easier way to go. Not always, but usually. Let's see, why can't you mount your rotary axis on the spoil board? Because it sits too high. I wouldn't be able to get the diameter I need. I don't have enough Z-travel. As it sits right now, I can chuck something 8 inches in diameter in my chuck and turn 8-inch diameter. I would only have about a 2-inch diameter if I put it up on the spoil board. So if I had a little bit more Z-travel, then I could. I have thought about this and talked with Dave, and I don't know. I may be doing some modification to it, but not yet. So, Jim Hester, is the reason you had to make the rotary axis cut out that there wasn't enough Z height capability? Yes, exactly. That's why I didn't mount it on the spoil board. So, and he won an Emmy for those 11 videos. Yeah, right. I'm a legend in my own mind there, Bob. So, Bob Hiltbridal also says Magnate will also sharpen their bits for a price. If you, I know nobody uses the yellow pages anymore besides me. If you Google saw sharpening in your area, like saw sharpening and your postal code, you should find some places that will sharpen bits. They'll sharpen all kinds of bits. And usually it's a cheap price. But you don't have to get it resharpened more than once or twice before it starts getting to the point to where it's just as cheap to replace it. I mean, there's no sense in resharpening a bit. If they're charging $6 a piece and a new bit's $18, you only have to sharpen it twice before it's more economical to buy a new bit. So, also, old bits do have uses for jigs and fixtures and what have you, but that's another story. So, let's see. What would I use to cut high-density foam down to about 10 centimeters? I am the wrong person to ask that, my friend Phil. I am a wood guy. I don't cut metals. I don't cut plastics. Not yet, anyway. I do plan on getting into that. Now, let me plug another maker, another CNC guy. Javi's Wood Shop, Javi. The guy has run an engraving business, a sign business, CNC cutting, engraving for 10, 15 years. He has done all kinds of materials like that, and I am trying to convince him he needs to do a series on doing materials other than woods to answer questions like that. What bit would you use to cut high-density foam? How about sign foam? How about acrylic? What bit would you use? Feed rates, spindle/router RPMs. You get that question a lot from people like me who have a router. The slowest my router will turn is about 12,000 RPM, which is still very fast for acrylic. What kind of feed rate should I use, and what should be my depth of cut if I want to cut the acrylic without melting it and welding plastic to the bit? So I'm trying to convince him to do these videos. He hasn't done any yet. So I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease. The more people that zap him messages going, hey, Javi, would you do a video on cutting acrylic with a router? What feeds and speeds and bit? You know, I've really been on him about it. And he keeps saying, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Well, let's all get on him. You're welcome, Javi. Love you. Mean it. So, let's see. Todd HCNC says, I used just an upcut 3 or 4 flute for foam. I think I fed it like 30 inches per minute. Yeah, it's, I want to get into sign foam and things like that, but I'm in this weird situation. I live in a small town and there's not a local supplier. So I can't get like signboard or anything like that. I'd have to go either 270 miles north to Portland or 270 miles south to Sacramento and then somehow get it up here, get it home, or pay to have it shipped. And if you think sign foam is expensive, shipping it is even adds, it goes from ridiculous to, oh my God, no. So, for small quantities, for small pieces, then yeah, you can order, through Amazon or what have you. But that's another thing Todd HCNC brings up. You want dust collection. My dust collection game is dismal. If you've watched any of my videos, I used to use a shop vac, and the shop vac died. It was an old shop vac when I hooked it up. It was just getting ready to go anyway. So it lasted about a year on that, and it finally went Tango uniform. So I'm without dust collection right now. When I get the new shop belt, that will change. Todd HCNC mentions the Home Depot foam. PVC, expanded PVC foam or extruded PVC foam, I'm not really sure what they call it, but the high density stuff for like trim panels and what have you, it's not available in my Home Depots. I've looked and I've begged. They won't even ship it here. So that's a regional thing. It's available in some areas at Lowe's and Home Depot, but not to me. The widest I can get is about a 3.5-inch wide fake trim, and I had a piece of it here. I don't have it anymore. I don't know what happened to it. I put it away somewheres. But that's about all I can get. I can't get big pieces of it. I can't even get something a foot square. I'd like to play with it, but it's just not in the cards right now. So, but eventually I'd like to. So, okay, everybody work on Javi. Get him to start posting videos on materials other than wood, and we'll all be happy. And because I'm serious, he's got experience with it. And Todd, my friend, got to get that camera situation straightened out and get to posting some videos. I'd love to see some of your work. There's lots of YouTube, man, but I'd like to see somebody experienced talking about how they do it, because that's how all of us get better. So, all right. Well, I've been sitting here yammering for close to 45 minutes. So if there are no more questions on the video this morning, or on the Gatton CNC, or on anything else I've done, we'll go ahead and we'll call this a day. Jeff, one final question. Does that Magnate 60-degree V-bit come with a 1/4-inch shank? You can get it in 1/4-inch and 1/2-inch, I believe. Check them out. I'll put a link in the description below to the one I have. Then you can do some comparison shopping on your own. Magnate bits are decent quality. I do like them. So, alrighty. Thank you very much. Y'all have a good Sunday. Get out in the shop, make some chips. And thank you very, very much for hanging out with me today. Thanks for checking out my videos. I really do appreciate it. Y'all take care.